Welcome, traveler, to Boring Papa's History for Sleep. Tonight, we step back into a world of ancient splendor, into the grand empire of Rome. But instead of the grand battles or the empire's rise to power, we will journey into something quieter, yet just as fascinating: Rome's strange beliefs and forgotten rituals. As you settle in, feel the weight of time fall gently upon you. The bustling city fades into the soft embrace of history, and all that remains is the calm sound of distant waves and the faint flicker of lanterns in the night. Here, we will uncover the mysteries that once filled the hearts of Romans, the superstitions, the gods, and the rituals they followed to protect their lives and ensure a place in the afterlife. Now, close your eyes, relax, and let the calm rhythm of this story carry you through the streets of ancient Rome. But before we begin, remember to subscribe to Papa Past for more peaceful journeys through history, where the past meets the present in gentle tales of forgotten times. In ancient Rome, the gods were not distant, ethereal beings dwelling on a far-off mountaintop. No, they were intimately present in every single moment of life, from the grandest triumphs to the most mundane daily tasks. The Romans held a profound belief that the gods walked among them, observing their every move, listening to every whisper, and influencing every outcome. Their world was alive with divinity, a tapestry woven with countless deities, each with their own unique domain and influence. There were gods for almost everything imaginable: gods of love and gods of war, deities of agriculture and protectors of good fortune. Each god and goddess had a specific, crucial role to play in the intricate workings of the world, and it was considered absolutely vital to acknowledge and appease them through meticulous rituals, heartfelt prayers, and appropriate offerings. At the very center of this vast and powerful divine pantheon stood Jupiter, the majestic king of the gods. Jupiter, with his mighty thunderbolt clutched in his hand, was more than just a powerful deity. He was the ultimate protector of Rome itself. He embodied the very essence of law, order, and the heavens. In his awe-inspiring presence, the Roman people felt a deep sense of security and stability. He was believed to rule with unparalleled wisdom and immense strength, ensuring that Rome would rise above all other civilizations, destined for greatness. Beside Jupiter stood Juno, his regal wife, the revered goddess of marriage, childbirth, and women. She was a fierce protector of families, watching over every sacred union and ensuring the prosperity and well-being of Roman households. Together, Jupiter and Juno formed the ultimate divine couple, powerful symbols of both authority and harmonious balance within the Roman world. Their influence extended from the public sphere of government to the most private corners of domestic life. And then there was Minerva, the third member of the revered Capitoline triad, alongside Jupiter and Juno. Minerva was the wise goddess of strategic warfare, wisdom, crafts, and arts. She was not a goddess of brute force like Mars, but of calculated strategy and intellectual prowess. Her guidance was sought in times of conflict, and her inspiration fueled the minds of artisans and thinkers. Further enriching this divine tapestry was Neptune, the formidable god of the sea, whose powerful trident could stir the deepest oceans or calm the most tempestuous waves. To the Romans, Neptune's absolute power over the sea was both greatly feared and deeply respected, especially as the very survival and expansion of their empire depended so heavily on the strength and success of their naval fleets, which traversed vast stretches of the Mediterranean. Mars, the god of war, was of paramount importance to a martial society like Rome. Unlike the Greek Ares, Mars was often viewed with respect as the father of Rome's founders, Romulus and Remus. Soldiers made fervent offerings to him before battle, seeking his strength and favor. Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, held sway over passions and procreation, and was also revered as an ancestor of the Roman people through Aeneas. The cycle of life, particularly agriculture, was governed by Ceres, the goddess of grain and the harvest. Farmers would make fervent prayers and offerings to her, hoping for a bountiful yield that would sustain their families and the entire city. Mercury, the swift messenger of the gods, with his winged sandals, was invoked by travelers for safe journeys, by merchants for profitable trade, and by those seeking quick wit and communication. But beyond these prominent figures, the divine permeated even the most mundane aspects of Roman existence. Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, home, and family, was central to Roman domestic and public life. Her eternal flame, guarded by the Vestal virgins, symbolized the eternal life and security of Rome itself. Janus, the two-faced god, looked simultaneously to the past and the future. He was the god of beginnings, endings, doorways, and transitions, invoked at the start of any new venture or year. Even Saturn, an ancient god of agriculture and time, was honored during the wildly popular festival of Saturnalia, a time of feasting, gift-giving, and temporary social reversal. These gods, though immense in their power, were also woven inextricably into the everyday fabric of Roman lives. Their presence was a constant reminder of the divine order, a silent force guiding and judging every action. The Romans were, without a doubt, a profoundly superstitious people, living in a world where every unusual occurrence, every subtle shift in nature, could be interpreted as a direct communication from the gods. They believed that the divine realm constantly sent messages to mortals through various omens and signs. These signs, often seemingly minor, held immense power and could profoundly alter the course of a man's life, a family's fortunes, or even the fate of the entire republic. From the precise flight of birds across the sky to the sudden rumble of distant thunder, every moment held the potential to carry a profound message from the divine. One of the most ancient and vital practices in Rome was augury, the revered art of reading omens, primarily through the flight patterns and behavior of birds. Augurs, who were specially trained priests and often prominent public figures, would carefully observe the direction, speed, and number of birds that flew overhead, or even the sounds they made. If a bird flew from a specific direction, perhaps from the left, it might be interpreted as a favorable sign for an upcoming journey, a crucial battle, or a political decision. Conversely, if the birds were unnaturally silent, or flew in a disordered or seemingly unnatural way, it was interpreted as a grave warning, a divine prohibition against a planned action. These celestial signs were never taken lightly. Important public decisions, military campaigns, and even personal undertakings were frequently delayed or entirely altered based on what the skilled augurs perceived. Beyond avian observations, Romans also paid close attention to haruspicy, the practice of divining the future through the examination of the entrails of sacrificed animals, particularly sheep and oxen. Haruspices, often from Etruscan tradition, would meticulously inspect the liver, lungs, and other organs for abnormalities, colors, or marks. A perfectly formed, healthy liver was a good omen, indicating divine approval, while any imperfection, a spot, a tear, an unusual growth, was considered a dire warning, suggesting divine displeasure or impending misfortune. This was an intensely practical form of divination, often performed before major public events, battles, or legislative sessions. Romans also firmly believed in portents and prodigies, unusual, often unsettling occurrences that were seen as powerful, explicit hints at divine will, usually indicating disapproval or impending disaster. If an animal was seen behaving strangely, perhaps a dog speaking or a snake appearing in an unexpected place, it was immediately considered a divine warning. Strange celestial phenomena like a comet appearing or a solar eclipse were terrifying prodigies that often led to widespread panic and elaborate rituals of atonement. Even common events like a clap of thunder from a clear sky or a statue weeping could send shivers down Roman spines and necessitate immediate religious intervention. Even dreams were not exempt from divine interpretation. To the Romans, dreams were not mere figments of the imagination, but could hold powerful prophetic messages from the gods. They could predict everything from personal success and romantic fortunes to the downfall of entire empires. Dream interpreters, oracles, and even philosophers studied and categorized dreams, believing them to be a direct channel to the divine, offering glimpses into the future or warnings from the spirit world. In times of national crisis, the Roman Senate might even consult the sacred Sibylline books, a collection of cryptic prophecies, to understand the God's will and determine the correct rituals to avert disaster. These practices were not just quaint superstitions. They were fundamental pillars of Roman decision-making, deeply influencing their public policy and private lives alike. While the grand temples of Rome, with their towering columns and magnificent statues, were symbols of public piety and state-sponsored worship, the true, intimate heart of Roman religion beat within the walls of the home. The Romans held a deep conviction that every household possessed its own protective deities, the Lares and the Penates. These were not distant Olympian gods, but benevolent, familiar spirits, deeply connected to the family and dwelling within their dwelling. The Lares were primarily guardians of the family, watching over the boundaries of the home and its inhabitants, often associated with crossroads and ensuring safe passage. The Penates, on the other hand, were closely linked to the food, the pantry, and the hearth, ensuring the sustenance and well-being of the family unit. Every Roman home, regardless of its size or wealth, would feature a small shrine, often referred to as a lararium. This shrine was typically found near the entrance, in the atrium, or sometimes in the kitchen, serving as the focal point for daily domestic worship. Here, offerings were made to these household gods, small, humble gifts that nevertheless carried immense spiritual significance. Daily life was profoundly intertwined with ritual, a gentle rhythm of devotion. Each morning, the family, led by the paterfamilias, the male head of the household, would gather at the lararium. They would offer small prayers, often spoken softly, accompanied by offerings of incense, a pinch of salt, a few drops of wine, or small portions of food from their own meals. These rituals were performed to honor the Lares and Penates, ensuring that these protective spirits would continue to keep their home safe, healthy, and prosperous. But the spiritual fabric of the Roman home extended even further. Each individual also had a personal protective spirit. For the male head of the household, this was his genius, a divine essence representing his procreative power, intelligence, and family line. For the female head of the household, it was her Juno, embodying her vitality, fertility, and womanly virtue. These personal spirits were also honored, particularly on birthdays and other significant life events, as they were believed to guide and protect the individual throughout their life. The rituals of the household were not grand or elaborate affairs designed for public display. Instead, they were deeply personal, peaceful, and profoundly calming, a continuous, quiet reaffirmation of the Romans' connection to the divine in the most intimate and fundamental parts of their lives. This daily piety fostered a sense of stability, continuity, and divine protection that grounded their entire existence, providing a quiet spiritual anchor in a busy and often uncertain world. The Romans were deeply concerned with the afterlife, a realm they believed was just as real, if not more significant, than the earthly existence they knew. They held a firm conviction that the soul, or anima, continued to exist after death, journeying to a vast and mysterious underworld. It was considered absolutely crucial to ensure that the deceased were properly honored and meticulously guided through specific rituals, for without these solemn rites, the soul might wander restlessly, forever lost and never finding true peace. Such a fate was feared not only for the departed, but also for the living, as a neglected spirit could become a malevolent one. One of the most important and complex rituals for the dead was the series of funerary rites. When a Roman passed away, their family immediately began the intricate process of preparing the body and ensuring its proper send-off. The deceased's eyes were closed, and their body was carefully washed, anointed with oils, and dressed in their finest garments, often a simple white toga, as if preparing the departed for their next great journey. A custom often observed was the placement of a coin, known as an obol, beneath the tongue or on the eye of the deceased. This coin was intended as payment for Charon, the ferryman who would transport the soul across the river Styx into the underworld. Without this payment, the soul might be condemned to wander the banks forever, a truly desolate prospect. Following the preparation, the deceased was often laid in state at home for several days, allowing friends and family to pay their respects. During this time, profound public lamentations were often heard, with professional mourners, praefectae, sometimes hired to weep and sing dirges, emphasizing the grief of the family. The funeral procession itself was a significant public event, moving from the home to the burial ground. It could range from simple and somber to elaborate and grand, especially for prominent citizens, involving musicians, actors wearing the masks of deceased ancestors, and the delivery of a public eulogy, laudatio funebris, in the forum, praising the virtues of the departed. The Romans practiced both burial and cremation, with cremation becoming increasingly common during the Republic and early Empire, before burial regained favor. If cremated, the ashes were carefully collected and placed in an urn, often interred in a family tomb or columbarium along a roadside, where the living could easily visit. If buried, the body was placed in a sarcophagus or simple grave. The connection to the dead did not end with the funeral. The Romans also observed annual rituals and feasts for the deceased, acknowledging the ongoing presence of their ancestors. The most significant of these was the Parentalia, a 9-day festival in February dedicated to honoring deceased ancestors and family members. During this time, public temples were closed and private familial duties took precedence. Families would gather at the tombs of their ancestors, making offerings of food, wine, milk, honey, flowers, and incense, inviting their spirits to partake in the feast. This was followed by the Feralia, the final day of the Parentalia, which was a more general day for offering sacrifices and prayers to the broader collective spirits of the dead. These offerings were not merely gestures, they were profound signs of respect, love, and a way to maintain the vital connection between the living and the dead, ensuring that the manes, the benevolent spirits of the blessed dead, remained at peace and continued to watch over their descendants. The Roman concept of the underworld, often referred to as Orcus or Hades, was a complex realm where souls journeyed after death. It was generally divided into different regions: the Elysian fields, Elysium, for the virtuous and heroic, a paradise of eternal spring and joy, and Tartarus, a place of punishment for the wicked. For the average soul, there was often an intermediate realm, a shadowy existence where they simply continued their post-mortem journey. Ensuring a proper funeral and continuous remembrance was paramount to helping the soul find its appropriate place and avoid becoming a restless, forgotten specter. Not all Roman rituals and acts of piety were conducted within the man-made grandeur of public temples or the intimate confines of private homes. Some of the most ancient and profound sacred places existed in nature itself, untouched by the hand of human architecture. The Romans held a deep-seated belief that certain groves, individual towering trees, secluded caves, and flowing springs were inherently blessed by the gods, places where the veil between the mortal and divine worlds was thinnest, where the very earth touched the will of the gods. The sacred grove, or lucus, was one such hallowed space, a natural sanctuary where the Romans gathered to worship their deities, offer sacrifices, and seek direct guidance from the divine in an environment permeated by numinous power. These sacred spaces were not marked by grand, imposing structures of marble and stone. Instead, they were typically simple groves of ancient trees, often oaks or laurels, or clearings in dense woodlands, frequently found near a pristine flowing spring or a tranquil pool. Here, the raw, untamed power of nature was believed to intertwine directly with the will of the gods. It was in these quiet, verdant sanctuaries that the most personal, intimate, and often spontaneous offerings could be made. A small bundle of flowers, a simple clay figurine, a few drops of wine poured upon the earth. The atmosphere was one of profound reverence and quiet awe. The rustling leaves seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The murmur of running water sounded like divine pronouncements, and the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy created a sense of mystical calm. Beyond the generalized sacred groves, specific natural features held their own particular sanctity. Certain ancient trees were often considered embodiments of divine power, sometimes associated with specific deities: an oak with Jupiter, a laurel with Apollo. People might tie small votive offerings to their branches or leave tokens at their base. Springs and rivers were often seen as living entities, possessing their own resident deities or nymphs, to whom offerings were made for health, fertility, or protection from danger. The river Tiber, for example, was considered a god in itself, and Romans would cast offerings into its waters. These natural sanctuaries provided a counterpoint to the formal, structured religion of the state. They were places where the connection between mortals and gods could be felt in its most primal, unfiltered form. A quiet space where the very air seemed to hum with divine presence, and the simple act of breathing became an act of reverence. Walking through such a grove, one could almost feel the tangible essence of Numen, the abstract, awe-inspiring divine power that resided in these places, making them sacred long before any temple was ever conceived. Among the myriad of Roman rituals, one of the most mysterious and haunting was the festival of Lemuria. This ancient ritual was held annually over 3 nights in the month of May, specifically on the 9th, 11th, and 13th. The entire purpose of this solemn observance was to appease the restless, potentially malevolent spirits of the dead, known as lemurs or larvae. The Romans believed that during this particular time of year, especially those who had not been properly honored, laid to rest, or perhaps those who had met a violent end, could return from the underworld and haunt the living. This belief instilled a quiet apprehension throughout the city. To ward off these lingering, potentially harmful spirits, the head of each household, the paterfamilias, would engage in a very specific, eerie ritual performed in the dead of night. At midnight, he would rise, walk barefoot through his home, and cleanse his hands 3 times in pure spring water. Then, with an atmosphere of quiet solemnity, he would begin the core of the ritual. Placing 9 black beans in his mouth, He would then proceed to walk through the house, meticulously throwing each bean over his shoulder one by one. As he did so, he would repeat a specific incantation 9 times. Haec ego mito, his redimo meke meosca. These I cast forth. With these beans I redeem me and mine. The black beans symbolized the spirit's food, a humble but vital offering meant to appease them and encourage them to return to the underworld without causing harm. Following the throwing of the beans, the paterfamilias would once again wash his hands and then clash bronze pots or vases together, making loud, clanging noises. This cacophony was meant to frighten away any lingering specters that had not been satisfied by the beans. Finally, he would repeat the ritualistic plea, Manes exite paterni, spirits of my ancestors, depart, again 9 times. The entire house was then purified, often by sweeping or burning sulfur. The atmosphere during Lemuria was palpably somber and eerie. All temples were closed, marriages were avoided, and any public business was suspended. The ritual was not about celebration, but about precaution and maintaining the delicate, precarious balance between the living and the dead. It served as a powerful reminder of the omnipresent spirit world and the essential duty of the living to respect the departed, ensuring that the lemurs were appeased and kept at peace, preventing their shadowy presence from bringing misfortune or fear to the Roman household. Among the most revered and enigmatic figures in ancient Rome were the Vestal Virgins, an order of priestesses dedicated to the goddess Vesta. Their unique role was absolutely paramount to the safety and continued prosperity of Rome, for they were the sacred guardians of Vesta's eternal flame. This flame, housed within the Temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum, was not merely a ceremonial fire. It was considered the literal embodiment of Rome's vitality, its very existence. If the flame were ever to be extinguished, it was believed to be a catastrophic omen, portending disaster, famine, or even the downfall of the city itself. The selection of a Vestal Virgin was a momentous occasion, reserved for girls between the ages of 6 and 10, chosen from noble patrician families. Once chosen, they made a solemn vow of chastity and dedicated themselves to the service of Vesta for a period of 30 years. This period was meticulously divided. The first 10 years were spent in learning the sacred rites, the next 10 in performing them, and the final 10 in teaching new recruits. Their life was one of immense privilege, but also strict discipline and grave responsibility. They lived together in the Atrium Vestae, a grand house adjacent to Vesta's temple, attended by servants and respected by all of society. Their primary duty was, of course, the perpetual tending of the sacred fire. This required constant vigilance, day and night, year after year. Beyond this, they also performed other crucial religious duties, such as fetching pure water from a sacred spring for rituals, preparing sacred cakes, mola salsa, used in sacrifices, and guarding important documents, including the Sibylline books. The consequences of breaking their vows, especially the vow of chastity, were terrifying and absolute. A Vestal found guilty of incestum, unchastity, was subjected to the most horrifying fate. She was buried alive in a subterranean chamber within the campus Celeratus, field of wickedness, near the Colline Gate, taking only a small lamp, some bread, and water. This gruesome punishment was seen as necessary to purify the city of the terrible sacrilege and avert divine wrath. Conversely, their purity and dedication brought immense honor and influence. They possessed unique legal privileges, could intercede on behalf of prisoners, and their testimony was considered inviolable. The Vestal virgins were more than just priestesses. They were living symbols of Rome's purity, stability, and enduring connection to the divine. Their tireless vigil over the sacred flame was a quiet, constant assurance to every Roman that the gods watched over their city, and that Rome, like the flame itself, would endure. While household rituals provided a personal connection to the divine, the public religious life of Rome was an awe-inspiring spectacle, a vibrant expression of collective piety and civic duty. The Roman calendar was punctuated by a continuous cycle of festivals, feriae, vows, vota, and public games, ludi, all deeply imbued with religious significance. These were not merely occasions for entertainment or leisure. They were solemn obligations, carefully orchestrated by the state to honor the gods, secure their favor, and maintain the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, which was essential for Rome's success. The ludi, or public games, were a prime example of this intertwining of religion and civic life. Though we often associate them with gladiatorial contests and chariot races, their primary purpose was religious. They were held in honor of specific deities, often following successful military campaigns or in times of crisis, serving as offerings and thanksgivings. The chariot races in the Circus Maximus, the gladiatorial contests in the Colosseum, and the theatrical performances, ludi scaenici, were all considered sacred acts, a form of worship designed to appease the gods and ensure their continued benevolence towards the Roman state. The atmosphere was one of fervent dedication, even amidst the excitement and spectacle. Another cornerstone of Roman public religion was the making of vows, or vota. Romans, from the common soldier to the mightiest general or emperor, would frequently make solemn promises to the gods. Before a battle, a general might vow to build a magnificent temple to Jupiter if granted victory. A private citizen might vow to offer a certain sacrifice if their illness was cured or their business prospered. These vows were binding religious contracts. To renege on a votum was a grave sacrilege, believed to incur divine wrath. Upon the successful fulfillment of the condition, the vow would be meticulously paid, often with grand public sacrifices, construction of temples, or the dedication of votive offerings inscribed with thanks. Public sacrifices were also commonplace and highly structured. A white bull might be led in a procession through the forum, adorned with ribbons, before being ritually sacrificed to Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. The entrails would be examined by Haruspyces, and then portions of the animal would be burnt as an offering, with the rest distributed for a communal feast. These acts were powerful expressions of collective devotion, reinforcing social cohesion and shared religious identity. The Roman year was replete with specific festivals, each with its own unique flavor and purpose. The Lupercalia in February, a fertility festival, saw young men almost naked, running through the streets, gently striking women with goatskin thongs to promote fertility. The Saturnalia in December was a riotous festival in honor of Saturn, characterized by feasting, gift-giving, and a temporary reversal of social roles where slaves were served by their masters. Even the most seemingly boisterous festivals had a serious, underlying religious purpose: to align human activities with the divine will and ensure the ongoing prosperity and well-being of Rome.